We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 27b. The Gemara is in the middle of explaining why it is that when a Nazir separates animals that he's going to use for his karbanos at the end of the term of his Naziros, those animals are already considered to be specified for specific karbanos, even if he didn't specify. And the Gemara explains, Mimotzis Amrit, Hadein Dechatos Tikravola. Are you able to say, for example, that this one that's a chatos, we can instead bring it as an ola? It's impossible to bring the one that would have been a chatos for an ola. Why? Because hacha nekeva, hacha zachar, because over here you can bring a nekeva, and over here you have to bring a zachar, meaning to say, when it comes to a chatas, it could be a nekeva. When it comes to a carbanola, it has to be a zachar. So you can't switch the animals around. It's impossible, and that's why by animals, unlike birds, it's always considered to be specified. Rashi says, "Mimotzis amrit dehechda v'chatas tikravola ha'ahid l'shum chatas have a nekeva." The one for a chatas is a nekeva. V'haida ola have a zachar. The one for an ola is a zachar, and therefore, again, that's why by animals it's always considered specified. But the Gemara continues, Meisiv Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asks the following question: Umi amrinon behema balas mum kestuma damya. We said on the previous daf, let's say the person separated animals that had blemishes, so then that's considered to be the same as money, and that's considered to be unspecified. And again, let's say the Nazir would die, so then unspecified funds, they can be donated to the Beis HaMikdash and used to bring the communal karbanos. And the reason why animals that have blemishes are considered like money is because that's what's done with animals with blemishes. They are redeemed, and the money is generally used for the Beis HaMikdash. So can we really say that that's the case, that it's considered that these animals are unspecified? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here a proof from the following Baraisa. Keitzad amru ha'ish megaleach al naziros aviv. In what situation do we say that a person can shave on the naziros of his father? Bisman sha Yehuva aviv nazirim, in a situation where he and his father are both nazirim. V'hivrish aviv mos lenaziruso, and the father separates money for his nazirus v'meis, and then the father dies. V'yamar, and the son says, Hareini nazir al manas shagaleach al mos abba. I'm going to be a nazir on condition that I shave on the money of my father. And we will go with the explanation of the Rosh. The Rosh says as follows, Hachi Garsin, on the proper text of the Gemara is as follows, Bisman shaya aviv nazir. If you have a situation where the father is a nazir, v'hifrish mo stumim l'niziruso, and he separates money, unallocated, he doesn't specify which money is for which carbon, but he separates money for the carbonas for the end of his term of the nazirus. V'yamar haben, and then the son says, Hareini nazir, al menas shagaleach al mos abba. I'm going to be a nazir, but on the condition that I'm going to shave using the money of my father, meaning I'm going to bring the carbonos using this money that my father set aside. Hareza megaleach al mos aviv. So then he actually is allowed to shave using the money of his father. He can use those funds for his karbanos. However, let's say he and his father are already Nazirim, meaning his Naziris already happens before the father separates the money. And then the father separates money, and he doesn't designate it specifically, and he dies. And then the son says, I'm going to shave using the money of my father. That's considered unallocated funds that have to be donated to the Beis HaMikdash for communal karbonos. The son cannot use those funds. The idea over here is that if the father was a Nazir, and the son only became a Nazir after the funds were allocated, and the son said, I'm going to be a Nazir and use these funds, that would be okay. But if you have a situation where the son is a Nazir and the father is a Nazir at the same time, so the son has his own independent obligation, he can't use the money that the father has set aside. That's how the Rosh understands, the different Rishonim discuss this, that's how the Rosh understands the opening line. In any case, there are certainly some words missing from the opening line, because there's one scenario where the person is allowed to use the funds from his father, and there's another scenario where the son is not allowed to use the funds from his father. In any case, the Brisa continues, Hayulo mos stumos yiplu linadava. If you have a situation of money that's unallocated, again, like we said, it falls linadava, it's used as donation to the Beis HaMikdash for communal karbanos. Now let's say you have a situation where an animal has been designated, separated to be used for their karbonos. So chatos, tamos, if it's the carbon chatos, that animal, again, the person, the Nazir, died, so the chatos has to die. Ola tikravola, that which was separated to be an ola can be brought as an ola. Ushlamim yikravu shlamim, and that which was separated to be brought as a shlamim can be brought as a shlamim. And Rashi says, Haisalo behema mufreshes kolomar shehivrish gimel behemos. He separated three animals. Avalo perish ezul chatos ve'ezul ola. As we've said before, he didn't say which one is for a chatos, which one's for an ola, but we know which one's for a chatos, which one's for an ola, because there are different rules in terms of which kind of animal for chatos, which kind of animal for ola, etc. etc. But the point to bring this brisa is as follows. The Gemara now says, my lav. Isn't the brisa saying, afilu balas mum, that even in a situation where the animals that were separated have blemishes, even over there, it's considered to be mufreshes? Rashi says, my lav, afilu balas mum, shein bali mumin, v'kachashav lukim mefurashim, even if a person separated animals, which the animals themselves are not going to be brought in the Beis HaMikdash, because they have blemishes, they're considered mufrashim. And the brisa is saying, the kamar hachatas tamus, v'ola tikrav kolomar timacher. What it means when we say we bring the ola, obviously it has a blemish, you can't bring it, it means we sell the one that's for an ola, v'yavi b'dameha ola, we use the money for an ola. V'kashler Rav Nachman d'amar balas mum kistuma dami. This is a question from Rav Nachman earlier, because he said that balas mum, if you have an animal that has a mum, that's the same as actual money, unallocated. You can just use the funds for any kind of carbon, meaning v'yiplo damel and adavi. You just use the funds donated to the Beis HaMikdash to bring communal karbanos. Kidin mostumen, like the halacha, if you have unallocated money, it's the same halacha. And so isn't that what it's saying over here in this brisa? It's actually saying, not like Rav Nachman. It's saying that by balas mum, we do say that it's considered meforeshes. And so the Gemara says, no, that's not true. Tamima, the brisa is simply talking about animals which actually could be brought as karbonos. They are unblemished. Aval balas mum kistuma dami. But the Gemara says, 1 second. But that means you're saying that balas mum, that if it has a blemish, it's unallocated. It's considered unspecified. But if that's the case, my iriamos, why does the brisa have to discuss money at all? Say the bigger chiddush. Leima haisalo behema balas mum. It should say if the animal that was designated has a mum, yiplu linadava, that money falls. That the money that you get from that animal is going to be donated for communal karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. And so the Gemara says to that, no, that's exactly what we're saying. Hachanami balas mum lamai kadisha lidmei. When a person sanctifies an animal with a blemish, why is he sanctifying it? He's sanctifying it for what purpose? He's sanctifying it for its value. So demei hainumos, its value, that is money. In other words, it's all the same thing. When the Brisa talks about money, it's identical to talking about balas mum. It doesn't even say mum. It is obvious that animals with a mum are going to be considered the equivalent of money. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rava. Rava asks a question from the following brisa. Karbono, it talks about by carbon chatas, he has to bring his carbon. And so the brisa says, Bikarbono hu yotze, ve'eno yotze bikarbonav. If a person has to bring his own carbon, he does not fulfill his obligation if he brings a carbon that was separated by his father. Yochel lo yotze bikarbono shalav if shifresh min akal ala chamura, or min achamura ala kala. Now I might think that a person can't use the carbon of his father. That's in a situation, let's say the father separated on a more lenient avera, and he wants to bring it for a stricter avera, or the father separated it for a stricter avera, and he wants to bring it for something more lenient. But you might think, maybe a person would be able to use the carbon separated by his father if the father separated it for something more lenient and he's also bringing it for something more lenient, or if the father separated it for something more strict and he's bringing it for the same level for something more strict. I might have thought that would be okay. Talmud Lomer, that's what the pasuk says. Karbono, it says his carbon. But karbono hu yotze ve'eno yotze bekarbono shalav. If a person has to bring his own carbon, he can't bring the carbon of his father. Now I might think you only cannot fulfill your obligation with the carbon of your father. He can't fulfill it with the carbon of his father by an animal, shehifresh, which was separated by the father. Afilu min akal ala kal, even if it's for a light avera and a light avera, min achamura ala chamura, or for a strict avera and a strict avera. Why would I think by animals you can't? Because by naziris also, let's say his father separated animals for his nazirus, the son is not allowed to use those animals for his own nazirus. However, I might think when it comes to carbon chatas, the person could fulfill his obligation with money that the father separated for a carbon. Maybe even from a strict avera onto a light avera, or maybe from a light avera and a strict avera. Because there is a halacha that a person is allowed to shave using the money of his father by nazirus, meaning he's allowed to use, let's say his father designated money for the karbanos at the end of his term of the nazirus. The son is allowed to do that in situations, as we'll see on the next amud, when it's unallocated. And so therefore I might have thought that by money, when it comes to carbon chatas as well, that should be effective. And Rashi over here explains, those are examples, where you bring the carbon. Those are examples of lighter averis. Stricter averis, let's say the son did a stricter sin than the father, father. Kagon shachal chayla v'dam, he ate chayla v'dam. Osheneschai b'chayve misas bezin, something that would have involved misas bezin had it been done on purpose. Talmud lomar v'im nefesh achas techeta v'hevi karbono. Again, he's got to bring his own carbon. Maybe that's only by animals. Sharein adam megalechal behemas aviv b'nazirus. You can't use your father's animal for your own nazirus. Kedetanan mishayehu v'aviv nazir. And like we said in the Mishnah, if a person and his father are nazirin, ve'efresh aviv mo stumin v'chulu, and only by money can the son use the money. Midukamar mos v'lamar behema, from the fact it says money and not animals. Shma minot al mos hu de megaleach v'lo behema. So by nazirus, money would be effective. He can use that, but not animals. Again, you might have thought the same thing when it comes to the carbon chatos, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph.